conspiracies. You can look under any rock, and there's a conspiracy. How many are real? How many are not? In a moment, Joseph Uzinski joins us as we talk about his work, American Conspiracy Theories, next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. We're going to talk for the next couple hours about conspiracy theories. Joseph Uzinski with us, received his bachelor's degree from Plymouth State University, master's from the University of New Hampshire, and his doctorate from the University of Arizona. His research has appeared in many scholarly journals and outlets. His first book, The People's News, Media, Politics, and the Demands of Capitalism, addresses how audience demands drive news content. We'll talk about that, too. His most recent work, American Conspiracy Theories, looks at why people do or don't believe in conspiracy theories here in America. He's currently the Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Miami. Fascinating topic, Joseph, and welcome to Coast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It seems to be true, maybe more now than before, that almost any event that happens, Joseph, any event that happens, somebody, right or wrong, is coming up with some conspiracy theory about it, whether it's Sandy Hook, where the children got killed, the Malaysian planes, you name it. There's a conspiracy theory behind everything. Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of people out there who like to think in conspiratorial terms. So there are just many people who have this mindset so that something happens and they are immediately going to think about it in terms of some powerful group is out there, they're up to no good, and they're probably behind this. But that phenomenon has been with us forever in the United States, and it's probably just an ingrained part of the human condition. If you go back in time, I mean, of course, we have the Sandy Hooks and, the 9/11s and the birther theories that are recent, but if you go back in time, you'll find the Salem witch trials, you'll find conspiracy theories about the Civil War, about the abolitionists, about, the Freemasons in the middle of the 1800s, the Red Scares, if you move ahead another 100 years. So these are part of who we are as humanity, and they're definitely part of who we are as Americans.
Well, now, I'm not going to discount every conspiracy theory because I sometimes think, where there's a little smoke, there could be a big fire behind it. And I think that some of these conspiracy theories, Joseph, might be justified and may lead to further investigation and further answers. But does it tell you something about the psyche of people where they generally just don't believe the government's handout story or whatever's reported?
Well, on your first point, George, you're absolutely right. It's not my intent to discount any conspiracy theory because, in fact, every single one of them could be true. I can't tell you which ones. It's very difficult to know with conspiracy theories which ones are true and which ones aren't. And the reason for that is if you have a group of people who are acting in secret and they're covering their tracks, well, of course, you're not going to be able to verify what they're up to all the time. So they very well could be true. Sometimes they foul up and they get caught. So let's take Watergate, for example.
Right.
When Woodward and Bernstein were investigating Watergate, it was because the conspirators fouled up. They got caught. And as they dug deeper and deeper, they started finding more and more evidence. But it took them a while before people started to really listen to them because they thought, hey, you guys are just a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists. But when they got all the evidence together, they brought down a presidency and they discovered a huge web of abuses that were going on in the Nixon administration.
That's right. And on the face of it, who would have thought that behind that little conspiracy that there truly was a lot of truth to it?
Oh, absolutely. And it went well beyond just the break-in in the Watergate Hotel. There were terrible abuses of power involving the CIA, involving the FBI and the IRS, awful things that the Nixon administration had done. So we don't want to dismiss any conspiracy theory. They could absolutely all be true. So if the question is it just that people don't trust the government? Sure. And it's right to be very skeptical of the government. We want people to be skeptical of the government. That's the whole point of democracy. People should be able to remove leaders. They should be able to keep their leaders accountable. And unless you have a group of dedicated people out there who are going to believe in conspiracy theories and push, whether it's the government or big business or whatever organization, to be honest, then democracy is going to go away, because we need those skeptics out there.
We do. Ironically, tomorrow for a couple hours, I'm going to be talking with Richard Gage, who heads up the architects and engineers who don't believe in the official version of 9/11. And, he'll bring forth his reasons on that, and he's got some new information as well. But with these conspiracy theories, is it natural or unnatural for someone to immediately say, well, the government's behind this? If somebody got shot, the government did it to plant it so some other group will be involved. It just seems to be, the case all the time that right after an episode, the conspiracy theory pops up.
Yeah, and that's a very common trope that we hear from conspiracy theorists. And Sandy Hook, the Obama administration was behind it to push their gun agenda. The Deepwater Horizon well blows up, and Obama was behind it to push his environmental agenda. 9/11 happens, Bush did it to push his, foreign policy agenda. So there's always this idea out there that somebody's behind it, that they did some sort of false flag operation to do it. Now, is it natural or unnatural? Well, for some people, it's very natural. For some people, it's part of their ideology to be very skeptical of whatever powerful group they fear, and they're going to put forward those explanations. And it doesn't mean that they're right or wrong. They could very well be right. They could very well be wrong. But people come to these conclusions often before the evidence is there. So
what amazes? Go ahead.
So
Joseph.
if you point to Sandy Hook, for example, people were coming out with conspiracy theories before people even really knew what had really happened. So it wasn't like there was a lot of evidence to support any theory at that point.
What I have found is those people who investigate these episodes and come up with their own conspiracy theories have done a very thorough job. They're not the people that you've just described who immediately go, "Oh, it's a conspiracy," and they blot out a whole bunch of things. The Mark Lanes who looked at the JFK assassination, the Alex Jones, and the people who have investigated 9/11, those people later on did an incredibly thorough job coming up with their reasons why they believe there's more to it than the official version. That I find fascinating.
And that's something that's been going on for a long time. And in doing that, those people do a really good service for us, because a lot of times what happens is that the official story will miss some things, or it might accidentally cover things up, or purposely cover some things up. And it takes citizen investigators out there to go out and find the missing evidence, to push for greater transparency. And a lot of times what they're going to do is bring new facts and evidence to light that people didn't know about before. And that's a really good thing. So if you go back to the JFK assassination, the Warren Commission releases this huge volumes in their report. And you go back then, people couldn't just go, search a word in Google and find it in those documents.
Right, exactly.
It was very difficult to get through those. Now, who did us a really good service? It was a group of housewives back then. After that Warren report came out, they were writing letters to each other. They were investigating the Warren report. One of them put together an index for it. So, back then it made it searchable in the way documents would be searchable in the 1960s. So it's those types of people who can really help out, because we can't expect an official story to cover everything.
No,
and we can't.
Hold on, Joseph. We're gonna take this break, and we'll be right back with you as we talk about American conspiracy theories. And we posted on our Facebook link asking you the question, what conspiracy theories do you believe in, if you want to go to that and participate. We're with Joseph Ujinsky, his book, American Conspiracy Theories. Are conspiracy theories healthy, Joseph?
Yes, they are absolutely healthy. In most instances. So let me qualify that.
All right.
I think that it's very good for people to have a healthy skepticism of government and corporations and international organizations. So that's a good thing. And even if some conspiracy theories are wrong, the fact that people are believing in them, that they're being skeptical of these powerful organizations, that keeps those powerful organizations on their toes. It keeps the government in check. Because the minute that people start saying, oh, we're not going to, look over the government's shoulders, we're going to believe everything they say, and we're not going to watch what corporations do, and we're not going to care about the things that come out of the UN, that's when they can get away with, sometimes doing really deleterious things. So it's important that people remain a healthy amount of skepticism. That's a good thing. Now, sometimes conspiracy theories can, lead to bad action. So think about, Jewish conspiracy theories in Germany, conspiracy theories in Russia that Stalin acted on that led to millions of deaths. There are conspiracy theories right now taking place in Africa so that people aren't getting the treatment that they need for the Ebola. There are conspiracy theories, let's stay in Africa just for a minute. People aren't taking the HIV medication because they think it's a plot by pharmaceutical companies, and instead they're taking vitamins and getting massage. And studies show that people are dying at rates, far higher than they would have to be. So there are times when conspiracy theories can actually hurt too. It's just like everything in life. All things taken to an extreme can cause trouble, but at some level they're generally helpful and probably benign.
Are you finding that nowadays conspiracy theories are more accurate than they might have been in the past, even beyond the Kennedy era?
That's a tough thing for me to know because, like I said, there are conspiracies taking place right now that we don't even know about, and there are conspiracy theories that are really difficult to prove, but they very well could be true. We just don't know. We may not know for years. We may never know. So, it's really tough to know. I can tell you this, that we were able to track the amount of conspiracy theories that people believed in over time, over the last 120 years. And what we found was that that level has come down slightly. So when you go on, to the mainstream media and you see them talking about, oh my God, conspiracy theorists are going crazy, there's more conspiracy than there's ever been. No, we don't find that that's true. We find that there's a relatively stable amount of conspiracism in the country, and if anything, it's come down. Now, there are 2 points in history where there was a lot of conspiracy theorizing going on, and that's at the end of the 1800s and during the early 1950s. And the first period had to do with business, is that everyone was concerned about the power that business was gaining in those late decades of the 1800s, because they were gaining a ton of power in a very unprecedented way. So people were very concerned about them. And then you fast forward about 50 years, then you have the Red Scare of the early 1950s, and that was another time where people were very worried. And
everybody was a communist. They were everywhere, right?
Yes, and some of it was fictional, but there were good reasons to be on guard. I mean, the Soviet Union had become very powerful. They were now an international superpower and an international competitor. China had just fallen, and people didn't know what to think of it. And they had heard horror stories coming out of Russia and China, and they didn't want that repeated here. So it was very fair for those people at that time to be suspicious of what was going on.
I'm convinced, Joseph, that some conspiracy theories, could be damaging to the point where weapons of mass destruction. We go into Iraq, we decimate that area. We take out Saddam Hussein, who truly wasn't a Boy Scout, but at least he kept a lid on things. Look what's happening there now and in Libya with Gaddafi gone. Right? Sometimes I guess conspiracy theories are accurate and could lead to bigger problems.
Absolutely true. And we see governments acting on conspiracy theories. We see people acting on conspiracy theories against government. Sometimes conspiracy theories beget more conspiracy theories and beget more conspiracies. I mean, take what happened at Ruby Ridge. I mean, You had Randy Weaver, who believed the government was out to get him. Well, he was right, because they were.
They were out to get him.
And the government was engaged in a really bad, they killed his kid and they killed his wife, and then they attempted to cover all that up. So there was a conspiracy there. So, sometimes people's fears are real, and then sometimes conspiracy theories beget more conspiracies.
Back in the 50s, the military, dropped biologicals on people, on ships, on people in the St. Louis area to test them, and they denied it. They covered it up.
And that's happened quite a few times. We have that scenario. We have the Tuskegee experiments that they denied, and then finally the president had to come out and apologize for. There are a few experiments like that took place where the government finally had to take responsibility. So, these things really do happen. So, when I study why people believe things, I don't come at it from the idea that, these people are crazy or they're paranoid or whatnot. Everyone believes in at least one conspiracy theory.
I think you're right. Why is it, Joseph, though, that those people who generally don't believe in conspiracy theories think that all of those who do are quacks?
Well, there's a way to think about it, is that there are people who are going to believe in a lot of conspiracy theories and they have that mindset, and you could call them quacks, but just the same, there's people who are on the opposite end of that spectrum who don't believe in any conspiracy theories. And those people, I wouldn't necessarily call them sane. They might think of themselves that way, but they might be naive. Because the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Not every conspiracy theory is true, but not everyone is false either. And if you dismiss every conspiracy theory and say they're all wrong and anyone who believes in it is foolish, then you're probably going to miss out on something very important. You're going to get duped.
You're going to get duped, and you're going to get duped in a big, big way. The mindset of those who believe in conspiracies, I find them to be extremely methodical, don't you?
Yeah, so it's not like these beliefs come out of midair. People often have evidence to back up their claims. Like I mentioned, earlier in the show, there are people who will immediately jump to a conclusion. Let's say something bad happens, they'll be like, oh, the government must be behind it. And they're making that claim without much evidence. But as time goes on, you'll see that conspiracy theorists do gather evidence. It's not the same evidence that the government gathers, and it's not the same. They won't use the same experts or the same scientists or the same science all the time. But they do go out and they gather evidence. So there is a methodology to it, and there is a science behind it. And it's not to say that one's right and one's wrong. I think that sometimes official stories and conspiracy stories often blend together. Sometimes they rely on the same evidence. Sometimes they complement each other. Mm-hmm. But what we find is that the conspiracy theory isn't necessarily wrong.
See, I'm convinced, Joseph, that in a perfect world, if everybody got along, there'd be a certain group out for opportunity that would create a terrorist act under a conspiracy theory guise in order to just disrupt everything. So I don't think we'll ever get a perfect world, because there are people out there who are manipulative and greedy who will do this just to benefit themselves.
That's absolutely true, and we see that throughout history. I mean, there are always groups doing bad things. You know, think about the news that you read earlier in the show. I find it fascinating. I mean, that there's fake cell towers up intercepting or
what are they doing?
Yeah, who's behind that? You know, and until there's further investigation, you know, we're not going to know. So we should be skeptical of that.
Strange stuff. Strange. So when you wrote the book American Conspiracy Theories, what was your initial approach? What was the story? What was the theory, the conspiracy theory, that got you to write the book? Or was it a whole bunch of them?
Well, there was an interesting thing that happened to me. I was in Manhattan during 9/11, and I had actually made my way down toward the Twin Towers. And I picked up a small camera, a disposable camera. I don't even think they have them anymore. And I started taking pictures.
They actually do. Not a lot of people buy it, though. with the Fuji film in it, I think. Yeah, and then you take the pictures and you throw them out. That's right.
So anyway, I was getting close to the Twin Towers, and they had deployed the military down there. They deployed the National Guard. And I started taking pictures, and then I took pictures of one National Guardsman or a soldier. He had some heavy artillery with him. And he said, "Hey, no pictures." And I thought to myself, that's the strangest thing. Now, I didn't immediately think that there was some conspiracy going on. And it was funny. He told me not to take pictures. I took a picture of him and then ran. So was he following some sort of order to tell people not to take pictures? Was he just a scared guy who didn't know what was going on and didn't know how to react in a really awful circumstance and was just saying, hey, don't take pictures? You know, I'll never know. But it always had me thinking, you know, are there deeper stories behind the events that happen in our lives? It wasn't until a few years later that I think I went to a coffee shop and got change, and on a dollar bill that I received as change, there was a stamp on it in red that said faked explosions, fake demolitions equals 9/11 hoax. And it was a 2006 dollar bill. So it got me thinking, you know, that person couldn't have stamped that bill before 2006, right? Because it was it hadn't, obviously the bill was 2006. It couldn't have been done before that time. So I'm like, people are very concerned about this 5 years after the fact. So I had always heard this explanation of conspiracy theories that, hey, something happens, people are just freaked out about it, and they concoct some simple explanation to make themselves feel good. But this was 5 years after the fact that somebody was still working on this and trying to spread the word. So I got thinking, what drives people to believe in conspiracy theories in the long term? You know, so it can't just be trying to come up with an explanation for something off the bat. There's got to be something deeper and richer behind this.
Why does the media treat conspiracy theories as foolish? And I'm talking about mainstream.
I can tell you this, that they absolutely do. So one thing I did was to track news coverage. So I tracked the news coverage over the Internet for about a year. Every news story that discussed a conspiracy or conspiracy theory. And then I went through every story, and then I did what's called content analysis. So I coded every story for whether they treated the conspiracy theory positively or in a neutral light or very negatively. You know, so about 70% of the stories treated the conspiracy theory negatively. And I think it was only about 10% that treated them positively. You know, what I would expect is that there would be a lot of neutral coverage, that, hey, there's a conspiracy theory, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But 70%, and that's something that made me think, too, because a lot of people say, oh, well, it's the Internet that makes everyone believe in conspiracy theories. Well, if that's the case and people are getting their news from the Internet, then they should be anti-conspiracy theorists, because most of the news is anti-conspiracy.
Mm-hmm. What about social networking? Has that helped or hurt conspiracy theories?
Well, some people think that people get involved in groups and they only talk to people who are like them, so they wind up becoming, you know, the social network echo chamber.
Right.
That could be true. So, for instance, there's a book by Cass Sunstein that came out a while ago. He used to work for the Obama administration, and he thought that there was a way to get people to stop believing in conspiracy theories, and he wanted to do that by sending undercover government agents into chat rooms to kind of infiltrate these social networking groups.
Yeah. I'm convinced, Joseph, at some of my speaking engagements that there's somebody from government at that event taking notes. I think they're listening to this show right now. I think they've assigned somebody, an intern, who knows who, taking notes. And that, to me, that's not a conspiracy theory. I think that's real.
Well, they're listening to your phone calls and they're following your texts and emails. So if they're coming to your speaking engagements, you should just be happy they paid admission for that one.
Exactly. Well, where's it all heading? The thoughts of conspiracy theories, investigating what could be false truths. Where's it all heading?
It's tough to know right now. I think that people are, right now there's a whole bunch of scandals going on in government that has people upset. I mean, the IRS targeting scandal is one, where they went after conservative groups, and now the emails disappeared, and then the BlackBerry disappeared, and then the email backup disappeared. And supposedly there's supposed to be 7 or 8 backups for government emails, and they're all gone. And then everyone's cell phone is gone. And they're not just gone, they've been supposedly smashed. So I think, things like that are arousing a new set of suspicion. And it's not unlike what we saw post-Watergate, where, there were so many conspiracies happening at once, so many government agencies potentially involved, that, I can imagine people being very upset about that. Fast and Furious is another one where the government was selling guns to, Mexican drug cartels, and those guns wound up killing one of our agents, and now they don't want to release any of the documents.
Oh, that's a good point.
Those are just two that we see right now. And this administration, has its share of scandals. Every administration has its share of scandals. But we're seeing it fairly widespread right now, and I can't imagine anyone would be happy about it.
No, not at all. And things like, or groups like Anonymous, are they helpful with the conspiracy theories?
Oh, gosh, I really don't know. I know that they release information. I know there are a lot of websites out there that get information, release it. WikiLeaks is one.
How about Edward Snowden?
Same thing. And I think in some ways they kind of help, and in other ways they might hurt. I think that groups like this are somewhat a response to the fact that the government's been making too much information secret. There's too many documents deemed classified, too much information that isn't getting out there. Sometimes just docile information is being deemed classified and can't be leaked. So there's a lot of secrecy out there. So I understand that there are going to be people who are going to want to, leak information, and I think that's, good in one respect, but in another respect it's really bad because there is some information that you don't want leaked.
Well, there's no doubt about that. Joseph, we're going to come back with you in just a moment here and take some phone calls on Coast to Coast AM. We're going to take your phone calls this hour as we talk about conspiracy theories. Much more to talk with Joseph Ujinsky about, as well as book American Conspiracy Theories. You talk about theories and what's going on. Listen to this story, and you got to listen to me really closely. This is breaking all over the country right now as I speak. I'm going to read the headline, but again, you got to listen to me after that. Do not believe this headline. Actress Betty White, 92, dies peacefully in her Los Angeles home. The problem was they were talking about her dyeing her hair, and they spelled dyes D-Y-E-S. But nobody saw it that way. They saw the wording, the verbiage, and now they think she's passed on. It's happening all over the country. She is not dead. Not dead. She dyed her hair. But that's how these things get blown out of proportion. Anyways, we're going to come back and talk with Joseph in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. Joseph Ujinsky with us. Joseph, I'm fascinated by your first book, The People's News, and how the audience drives news content. It's all driven about ratings. I've been in the news business all my life, and they truly program to what the viewer wants to watch. And, they hope that the story will bring it in, but a lot of times it doesn't.
Well, that's exactly what I found in my research on the media. I mean, a lot of people think that, the media is biased one way or the other. And yeah, it is to some extent. But the truth is, if a media outlet decided to go, too far from what the audience wanted in terms of its slant, or in terms of the content that it provided, then people would stop watching, they'd stop buying it, they wouldn't pay attention anymore.
They used to say in the local news business, if it bleeds, it leads. And, they used to say research showed in local markets that people liked, murder, fires, death, mayhem, and that's always what led most of those local newscasts in those days.
And even now, I mean, there's two big types of stories that you'll see on the local news. You'll see something with violence and crime or some sort of accident. So they might lead with, there's an accident on the highway, or there was a convenience store held up. And then after that, they'll give a story about a dog, a cat, or a kangaroo. So it's some sort of violent story and then some sort of animal story, and those are the two big things that people really like. I mean, we like violence and we like fuzzy animals.
So back to conspiracy theories for a moment. Since the JFK assassination in 1963, do you find that as the point where Americans just simply stopped believing in government?
No. I think that there was a healthy skepticism of government long before that. And in fact, if you go into the 1930s, there were a lot of people who were incredibly skeptical of FDR. Like with those massive programs that he put in place during the Depression, there were people who thought, that those were plots. They thought he was a communist and a dictator, particularly when he tried to stack the Supreme Court in his favor. People were very upset about that because they saw it as a power grab, and they saw it as some sort of dictator technique to take over all power. So there's always been pushback against the government. There's always a group of people who are somewhat skeptical, and that group tends to fluctuate over time, just as power fluctuates. So think about who are the biggest conspiracy theorists since 2009. It's the people on the right, the people who are giving a lot of pushback to the Obama administration. It's those people who think he might have been born somewhere else, who think he blew up the Deepwater Horizon well, who think he might have been behind Sandy Hook, who think that he's covering up something in the IRS scandal or the Benghazi scandal. So a lot of the big conspiracy theories that we see now are coming from the right side, because they're providing that counterbalance to the Obama administration.
And again, some of them may be true.
That's right. And as we hear more about Benghazi or what is going on with that IRS investigation, some of these things may very well turn out to be true, and who knows where they're going to lead. And if you go back a few years, the big conspiracy theories were aimed at George W. Bush.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. What do you see as the biggest conspiracy theory to date, right? Is it 9/11?
You mean in all of American history? I mean, there are big ones. I mean, fears about Freemasons. I mean, fears about the British. I mean, if you go to the Declaration of Independence, you have one of the best documents ever written in the first few paragraphs. And then it turns into essentially a conspiracy theory in the middle of the document where they're accusing the king of tyranny and all sorts of stuff. And in fact, the original version of that document that Jefferson wrote had a lot more conspiratorial charges in it. But the other founding fathers decided to remove most of it. So there are conspiracy theories that are pretty big, and that was one. I mean, we're not going to cancel the fireworks on the 4th of July because of that, and we're not going to not celebrate independence because independence, was partially based on some conspiratorial views. We were worried about the Freemasons in the 1800s, the slave power, the abolitionists. I think one of the most enduring ones, obviously the last 60 years, is JFK. I mean, that one reaches, when you poll on it, reaches huge numbers. Sometimes you'll get as high as 90% people saying that they believe in it.
That is huge. That is huge.
And just to put that in perspective for you, a lot of the recent popular theories, like the birther theory or the truther theory, they poll at about 25 to 35%. So when we're talking about JFK, we're talking about double that amount. And what's even more interesting is that a lot of the people who believe in that weren't even born at the time.
No, that's true. Okay, let's take some calls here for you. We'll pick it up by going to Alex in Los Angeles, west of the Rockies. Alex, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Hey, George. In 1996, I was working at a gas station, and I was working with a Muslim guy, and he went to a meeting, and he came back swearing that the U.S. was going to be the end of the U.S., the USA. And then 9/11 came up, and I thought maybe that was the end of the world, but it wasn't.
You remembered that moment right after that happened, didn't you?
Yes, I did. He came back from the meeting all flustered and telling me that the U.S. is the end of the USA, but it wasn't. It was not the end of the USA.
No, it's going to take a long time before it ends the USA, to be sure. But with conspiracy theories, why do people, when they talk to somebody in a setting, why is it so volatile? Why do they seem to almost get into a fist fight, Joseph?
Because conspiracy theories deal with two really important things. And one is truth, and the other one is power. And those are things that are very difficult to understand and very difficult to negotiate with people. So when we're talking about a conspiracy theory, we're talking about some secretive, very powerful group doing something. So what we're trying to do with a conspiracy theory is understand who's in power and how are they using that power. And that's really important because nobody really likes to have other groups have power over them, especially if those groups are up to no good. So when we talk about conspiracy theories, when people don't agree, with what we think, that can be somewhat upsetting. But just the same, all of our beliefs, it's difficult to negotiate. Let's say that I'm a Catholic and I believe in the 10 Commandments, and you're an atheist and you believe in 0 commandments.
Right.
Are we going to negotiate and say, okay, well, we'll meet in the middle and we'll believe in 5 of the 10?
That's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Unless you let me pick the 5, right? So
why can't I pick the 5? Let's go to our first-time caller, Katia in Bellingham, Washington. Katia, go ahead.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. It's my first time calling. And my question for you, for our guest, is out of all the cases and the conspiracies that you've done a lot of research in, which conspiracy would you say has the strongest evidence but maybe is not well known or people don't necessarily believe in or try to debunk? What would you say to that? Thank you.
Yeah, what would you say Joseph could be the biggest conspiracy theory that most people probably don't believe in? Let's go with that first.
Oh, gosh. So one that's true that no one believes in?
Yeah, in your opinion.
Oh, gosh. I'll tell you this, is that I guarantee that there are ones that are true that are going on right now that no one knows about.
They're happening right now.
Yeah, happening right now, and they're always happening right now. And it's up to people to hold their government institutions accountable and to be vigilant on these groups. So that's a tough question to answer because, if we don't know about it, we don't know about it. And I would like to say I know about it. I don't. I would say, though, that one that has good evidence, and most people agree, is, JFK theories. There is pretty good evidence that something was covered up, there was a rush to judgment. And perhaps that rush to judgment was for good reason. I mean, we were in the middle of a Cold War. The government did not want people jumping to conclusions and pushing for perhaps a strike against Cuba or the Soviets. So I think conclusions were jumped to pretty quickly. Does that mean that there was a conspiracy to kill Kennedy? No, not necessarily. But there is certainly pretty good evidence that the investigation could have been a heck of a lot better than it was.
Well, and look at the Marilyn Monroe conspiracy theory or the Princess Diana theory, too.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, there are people now who are still questioning those. And you go back in time, I mean, Zachary Taylor, president from the 1800s, people are concerned that he might have been poisoned. So they dug up his body only a few decades ago to figure out what really happened to him. So, you know,
Yasser Arafat, remember that one?
Oh, absolutely. And people were after he passed away, people were testing him to see what happened there. I think recently I think the TWA flight was dug up again to try and investigate that. So there's all sorts of conspiracies out there that people are searching for, and they're constantly gathering evidence. And so, yeah.
Well, and like you said, some of them could be true. So let me ask you this, Joseph. Some of them are true, or most of them are true? Conspiracy theories. What do you think?
Oh, God, I have come across so many conspiracy theories. So in the news, we'll hear about the big ones. So we all know about JFK conspiracy theories and birther and truther. And anytime something big happens, there'll be a conspiracy theory that'll pop right up, and then maybe it'll go off into the night once it doesn't catch on. But there are millions of conspiracy theories out there. And if you go through time, I mean, there's a lot of small fish out there that we try to pick up in our data collection, ones that most people haven't heard of. A few people will believe in it for a short amount of time. Evidence won't materialize, and then that belief, goes away. But there are so many more of those than there are, the big noticeable ones like the birther and the truther theories. So, for instance, you go back to, about 100 years ago, there was a group of people who believed that the government was trying to kill off pet dogs, that they were passing secret legislation to kill off pet dogs. In the late 1960s, there was a conspiracy theory that the CIA had created lesbianism as part of a clandestine plot.
Sure. Or created and released the HIV virus.
Sure. And a lot of these theories, they'll catch on with a few people. Maybe they'll burn brightly for a few moments, and then they'll go out, and then we won't hear from them again. So there are so many out there. It's tough to say exactly how many are true and how many are false, but, we know the ones that become absolutely true. We know Watergate. We know Iran-Contra. We know Tuskegee. We know those ones. And there's a whole lot of other ones that could be true. So I try not to dismiss anything offhand. But instead, I try to be even-handed and let the evidence come in.
And, the Lincoln assassination, perfect conspiracy theory that turned out to be true.
Sure. Obviously there was a lone gunman, but as history has delved in further, we learned that it was a little more broad than that. There were other people involved. It might have been more far-ranging than it turned out to be. So sometimes, and that was a long time ago, 160 years ago. So sometimes these take a long time to get the evidence together and really get the information out there.
Are conspiracy theories generally accurate, truthful, or not?
Oh, God. Some are closer to the truth than others, and it's just tough to know. Written into every...
It really is tough.
Yeah, written into every conspiracy theory is the idea that we just can't know. Imagine that you're a physical scientist, and you're trying to discover, say, an electron inside of an atom. Well, it's pretty easy to do that, right? Because the electron isn't trying to hide itself from you. But imagine for a moment that it was. That you think the electron's there, and it is, but you can't find it because it's actively working to hide itself from you. And that's kind of what a conspiracy is. The conspirators are working hard to cover their tracks. They don't want to get caught. So if there's evidence out there that they leave behind, it might be misdirection. If there, and if there's no evidence, that makes perfect sense because they're hiding it.
That's
what a conspiracy is.
One of my favorites, Joseph, during the Kennedy assassination, the dying witnesses who seemed to either die or they were killed off. And you know what? A lot of them did die. There's no doubt about that.
That's true. And that made it very tough to go back and reinvestigate the JFK assassination once Congress did reopen it. So, after the Warren Commission came out with its report, Congress went back in the late 70s, and they set up a House Committee on Assassinations to look at both the assassination of JFK and of Martin Luther King. And they wanted to investigate both of those to see if there was a broader conspiracy there. And the tough thing there was to get good evidence. And back then, the technology was not that good. So when they were re-examining, the films and whatever audio was available in the JFK case, it was very difficult. And that compounds when witnesses are no longer around to testify.
Let's go to John in Jessup, Maryland. John, go ahead. Welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you. Good morning. Yes, real quick, I want to ask our guest a couple questions here. One is, how familiar is he with the conspiracy theories surrounding Agenda 21 and supposed UN plans for total global population control? And the other one is, is he familiar with any of the Jesuit conspiracy theories that have resurfaced since Pope Francis was elected?
Did you hear of any of those, Joseph?
Yeah, in terms of the Agenda 21 and the UN getting involved in our domestic policy, yeah, I have heard of those.
All right, go ahead.
I'm not that familiar with the second one, which is the Jesuit conspiracy theory.
Okay, I'm going to have you address a little bit more of the population control when we come back, and we'll take some final calls. Have you had a chance yet to watch our television program, Beyond Belief? You should. You talk about conspiracy theories. We've got it all with Beyond Belief. Take a look at it. Register to watch it by simply going to this website, www.beyondbelief.com. Welcome back. Joseph Ujinsky with us. Joseph, let's get back to the theory of population control. We've heard these conspiracy theories that there are groups out there that would love to reduce the 7 billion of us down to 500 million. What have you heard there?
Well, that certainly is a conspiracy theory, and that comes up in different forms from time to time. So there was a governor's race a few years back in Colorado, and one of the big issues in that race was a bike-sharing program that was taking place in Denver, and people were concerned that was part of a UN plot to take away, local property rights. That people didn't like that sort of intrusion. We've seen that come up with recycling plans and with land use plans, where people are suspicious of these type of management of local resources and think that it's part of some larger plot to take away local autonomy and to put us under, international rule. And, whether that's true or not, I can't say, but I can say this. I can't blame anyone for not wanting the UN to run our country.
Somebody's got to.
Yeah.
And the theory about the Jesuits, of course, Jesuits being the priests, Society of Jesus, they are involved, according to conspiracy theories, in just about everything. They were even blamed, Joseph, for the sinking of the Titanic. All kinds of weird theories are out there about them.
Oh, sure. If you go back in time, the Catholics have often been accused of being part of a plot to take over the country. Particularly in the early 1960s when Kennedy was running, and when he was president, people thought that he was the first Catholic president. People thought he was going to turn over control to the Pope, And that happened just a few decades before that when there was a Catholic person running for president, and people thought, the Catholics are going to turn over control of our country to the Vatican. So there have been fears of that for a long time, going back, particularly to when Irish immigration came in a large wave about 110, 120, 130 years ago.
Let's go to the phones now. Ann is in Toronto. Welcome to the program where I'll be on November 8th. Hey, Ann, go ahead.
Hi. I was just going to tell you my story about what happened to 9/11,
All right.
What I heard up here in Canada.
And what do you believe? Tell us that afterward, okay? Go ahead.
Okay. What I heard was that there was no plane that was headed for that tower, and that the people on the ground were phoning people on a plane that was supposed to be headed for that tower, and somehow the people on the ground they found out about the other planes crashing into the building, and they took over the jet, and they landed it in a field. They crashed the plane on the ground, and they were supposed to be heroes.
Well, that's another one of those many theories, Joseph. And what do you believe, Ann? What do you think happened?
I believe that to be true because when I saw the film on TV, it was supposed to be live, and there was no airplane in that building.
Well, there you go, Joseph.
Well, there are a lot of theories about what happened on 9/11, and, they can't all be true. So even amongst that group who believe that, there was some plot behind it, there's still a lot of disagreement about who was behind it, what was really going on, what the purpose for it was, how they pulled it off. Some people think that there was explosions. Some people think there were planes. Other people think there was no planes. So there are a lot of people who obviously have questions still about what happened that really awful day.
And part of Coast to Coast tomorrow, of course, Richard Gage, as I mentioned, will be our guest. He's one of 700 architects and engineers that believe publicly that the official story is not what it's supposed to be. Let's go back to more calls here. Let's go to Irondale, Alabama. Jay is with us on Coast to Coast. Jay, welcome to the program. Go ahead.
Greetings. I've seen the movie Conspiracy Theory, and I talked to Mel Gibson, and he'd love to be a guest on your show.
Well, you get him for me. You know him?
No, I'm kidding. I'm being sarcastic.
Oh, darn. Well, we'll find him.
I figured you would think that was coming, George.
I know. Well, I'm kind of gullible sometimes.
It's very interesting. People believe what they want to. They've been brainwashed not to believe things, and if they don't want to believe something, it's a conspiracy theory. The truth will set you free. You'll know the truth, and truth will set you free. When the truth comes out, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. I worked with somebody one time who heckled me and pointed her finger at me, and she said, "He's a conspiracy theorist." And I said, "Your brain is." And she never said anything to me anymore. This is not, you have to learn to answer the fool according to their folly. This is not a conspiracy theory. Michael Aquino, who you've probably heard of, there's people out there listening, and if you're listening in SA, hello, he retired as a general from the U.S. Army. He is the head of the Temple of Set, which is based in San Francisco. He first came on the TV in the late 80s on Geraldo Rivera's show when he did a segment on what is called Satanism. This man was in the U.S. military. He retired as a general, as I said before, and he was the head of the NSA, and they didn't have a problem with it. That is not a conspiracy theory. When people don't want to believe something, there's, in media, I've worked in it before, there's the cover story, and then there's the truth. The truth will always come out. Thank you, and God bless.
It eventually will come out, but you got to pound away at it, Jay. I mean, it's just the way it is. And Joseph, as you look at all these possible theories that are out there today, do people leak things in order to create the conspiracy theory? Will government do that?
Oh, well, government does leak a lot of materials. You know, and the interesting thing with government is they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. You know, you'll have people within government who go and leak documents, and the government goes and prosecutes them. And then on the other side of their mouth, they leak documents to try and make themselves look good or to try and create a favorable image of themselves. And, the ones in government who leak the documents, for whatever reason, they never get in trouble, but it's the other people who get in trouble. So it's not always clear what's okay to leak and what isn't okay to leak. So it's very strange. Your caller does have a really good point. I mean, people do believe what they want to believe.
No question.
And if you believe something, there's no evidence I can give you that's going to convince you of it. I can pound my fists on the table all day. I can bang my head into the wall, and you're not going to budge in your beliefs. And there really isn't that much I can do about it. So once people are, have a belief and they're set in their ways with it, you're not going to unhinge them. And that's the same for conspiracy beliefs as it is for other beliefs. I mean, go try to talk a Republican into being a Democrat.
Or vice versa. Or vice versa, right?
That's right.
Let's go to Summer in the state of Washington. Hey, Summer, go ahead.
Hey, George.
Hi.
I actually, back in the late 90s, I recall when I was in elementary school, I was about 10 years old, they made us watch this video, and it was entitled, What to Do When the Rapture Comes. And I feel like that had to be a conspiracy because it was a huge deal back then, and I've never heard anything since.
Well, I haven't heard anything about that, but there are a lot of stories about what to do when the rapture comes, and I don't know.
Actually, it's a very big storyline right now, and people.
It's a huge story. I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think you either believe it or you don't. Right?
That's right. It's. I think a lot of people are concerned that the end times might be coming, and that's a big thing in our popular culture. Whether it's zombies that take over the world, and there's a post-apocalyptic zombie land, or something else bad happens. Maybe it's nuclear war. Maybe it's a threat of some sort of disease that takes over. But I think there's always this fear that the end could be near.
By trying to get to the truth, Joseph, do we, as folks in the media, do we tend to fuel the conspiracy theories? I mean, I remember when, the WHO, World Health Organization, said that SARS was going to become a pandemic. And I said, no, it's not. We only had a couple deaths. It's not going to happen. And, of course, it never did. But do we fuel that, or are we out there as truth seekers doing what we should be doing?
Well, in the mainstream media, they fuel conspiracy theories in two ways. And one of those is that they do discuss conspiracy theories. They're very dismissive of them, but they do discuss them. So after Sandy Hook happened, I mean, there was a lot of discussion in the mainstream media of conspiracy theories surrounding, the tragedy at Sandy Hook. None of that discussion in the mainstream media was supportive of the conspiracy theory. So, but with that said, I mean, that does help spread suspicion just by mentioning it, that some people are going to buy into it no matter how it's discussed. And they do it another way, too, by being so dismissive of non-authoritative stories. People do get suspicious of the media. And by focusing their news on only certain things and having a very tight agenda, the mainstream media is often accused of covering things up, of not covering the right things, of having a very deep ideological slant. So in that case, people are suspicious of them too. And when we did surveys, we asked people, what do you think about the mainstream media? Do you think that they can be trusted? And about 40% said no. We can't trust them. So that's a lot of people who don't trust the mainstream news.
All right, let's go to Michael in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Michael, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Joseph, the recently retired governor of Virginia, Governor Bob McDonnell, has been under trial for the last several weeks, corruption trial, carried on by the federal government. He has not gotten a fair trial from my point of view. I talked to 4 of his friends earlier today, all of them talk show hosts in this area. Bob McDonnell comes from Virginia Beach. Now, the big conspiracy that I'm seeing in this thing has to do with this man at Star Scientific, Johnny Williams. He received a $10 million investment, it's called. I'm calling it a donation, and I believe that this was a government sting operation. I discussed it with 4 talk show hosts today. Your local affiliate here, George, WNIS, has Rick Santorum scheduled for next Monday.
Mm-hmm.
George, I want you to call me back. We are going to have breaking news for you.
All right, you got that. Mike, I'm going to put you on hold, and you can give Tom your number. We'll follow up on that. Let's go to Raheem in Oakland, California now. Hi, Raheem. Thanks for holding.
Oh, thank you, George Nuri. Thank you for shedding light. Does Nuri mean light? Doesn't Nuri mean from the light in Arabic?
It sure does.
Anyhow, I wanted to say I was in talk to Art Bell and Linda Morton Howe in the late 90s about crop circles, speaking of conspiracies.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say real quick about conspiracies that it's probably good to listen to as many different theories as possible and then choose for yourself about the truth. And in terms of conspiracy, it seems that Western civilization is the foundation is, remember Julius Caesar getting assassinated, and he said, et tu, Brutus? It was a conspiracy to assassinate Julius Caesar. It seems that's big in our Western civilization. But yes, I lost a lot of friends because I was concerned about the 9/11 tragedy, and I was questioning the events of the day. And I'm glad you're having Richard Gage tomorrow. I'll try to tune in. Sometimes when there's a lot of theories, there's also a lot of junk theories that want to discredit or distract from other real theories. And also sometimes when there's a lot of theories, it's good to look at the scientific law. And I agree with the scientists and engineers who, question the official versions of 9/11. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work.
You are very welcome. And, of course, with conspiracy theories, Joseph, you also have to gauge where they're coming from, because, again, we're convinced that a lot of organizations, big government, who knows who, will leak stories to try to confuse people from getting the real facts.
That's right. You can't always trust everything you see on the Internet. I mean, there are things that go through so quickly now. So, somebody will post something on Facebook, and it will travel like wildfire. And some people will think it's true. Other people will think, maybe this is the new conspiracy theory, and they'll think that all conspiracy theories are, part of whatever it is they're seeing on Facebook or Twitter. But it's so easy to get information out there nowadays. Anyone can do it. And if it gets picked up in social media, it can travel very fast. So people need to be very careful about what their sources are and stick with the sources that they trust.
Do schools teach conspiracy theories? I mean, is this a subject of debate in class?
I teach a class on conspiracy theories and why people believe in them. I don't try to teach my students to believe in conspiracy theories. I tell them that that's, they can pick their own conspiracy theories on their own time. But I will share this with you. I give them an interesting assignment where I have them make up their own conspiracy theory.
What comes up the most?
Oh, a lot of the theories have to do with either fast food or alcohol or music artists, because those are the things that college students are, really into. Sure. So all the conspiracy theories have to do with them. And after they write it, I make them trade it with someone else, and then that other person has to debunk it. And what happens is, when their classmate debunks their conspiracy theory, they get very upset.
Sure.
And I say, why are you upset? You made up that theory. And they say, well, I believe it now.
Did they bring up the Jim Morrison Doors theory?
I'll tell you, a lot of people, particularly in college, because they're big into that music scene. They follow the deaths of famous people. I mean, there's one theory where a lot of people die at the age of 27.
That's right.
And there's a big list of people who died at that age, and there are a lot of students who believe that. A big one now among college students has to do with Jay-Z and Beyonce being part of the Illuminati, and giving secret hand signals when they're at award shows.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember they said Bush was doing that too. He'd hold his hands up, and I think it was the symbol of something. They're out there, but like you said at the onset, Joseph, these theories, many of them could be true, and you can't discount them, can you?
That's right. I mean, every conspiracy theory could be true, and I think it's up to each person to decide which ones are more likely to be true than others. And sometimes that's where we get into trouble, because we're not always going to agree, which one.
Well, we lost you right at the end, Joseph, but thank God we're here. That alone is a conspiracy theory, I'll tell you. Hey, we'll be back in a moment as we talk about UFOs and secret bases. In a moment, we'll be talking with Norio Hayakawa about secret bases and about UFOs and exactly what might be happening on those bases. Stand by on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Norio Hayakawa calls himself an unorthodox ufologist and activist. He has spent almost 11-plus years investigating Area 51 in Nevada. He says that there is so much to that area than just the superficial facts made public about this well-known base. And here he is back on Coast to Coast with some incredible news that we're going to talk about tonight. Norio, thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, George, once again for having me on your great show.
How did you get involved in investigating UFOs? How did that happen for you?
Actually, it was in 1961 that I earnestly began to take interest in UFOs. While I was in high school in 1961, I started joining organizations such as NICAP and APRO and so on, and began to subscribe to their newsletters at that time. But it was because when I was small, my father told me that he had seen some strange greenish ball of fire maneuvering over the Bay of Yokohama, Japan in 1947. I believe that's what he said. In the summer of 1947, while fishing on the Bay of Yokohama, Japan, one summer night, he saw an incredibly beautiful greenish ball of fire as if it was maneuvering intelligently over the bay. And he used to tell me and my mother about it while I was growing up. And so that's probably one of the reasons I was interested in UFOs, especially after I entered high school. And so, as I said, I have been in this research since 1961. And
that's
then,
a long time.
1964, George. What really catapulted my interest was an amazing news from a small town called Socorro, New Mexico, in 1964, the famous Socorro incident. And it was written up in a Japanese newspaper. It wasn't a headline news, but it was in third or fourth page. But it clearly said that a police officer sees a saucer sitting on sand. And this was the famous Lonnie Zamora incident.
Who passed away a couple of years ago, didn't he?
That's correct. And I had a chance to talk with Lonnie Zamora briefly on the phone after I moved to New Mexico from California about 8 years ago. And I found him to be a very, very likable person and very, a scholar and a gentleman and a scholar. And I firmly believe he exactly saw what he described that he saw.
It was an incredible case. And he even saw this craft take off, didn't he?
That's correct. He saw this craft, an oval-shaped object with an insignia on top of it. And he saw it depart, and then a few minutes later, another police officer arrived and verified the smoking, the burning grass in the desert in that same spot that the object landed. So this was actually one of the most significant UFO incidents reported, and it was thoroughly investigated by Alan J. Hynek with the Air Force. And so I am convinced that this was a real incident and not a staged incident. You hear nowadays that this was all hoaxed by students of the college nearby. But there's no way. I'm sure that this was an authentic incident. And the question is, what did he see? Did he see an alien spacecraft, or did he see one of ours? And that's the big question.
Well, that is a good question. But he did see smaller alien-type figures, did he not?
Well, he never described these two small figures as alien. He simply described these two small figures as wearing some kind of a white coverall. And they were both touching the outside of the craft. And when they recognized that they were being observed about 400 feet away, then they went inside the craft, and the craft took off. But what's fascinating is that these two small figures were not extraordinary entities. Actually, Lonnie Zamora described them as normal-looking with coveralls. So the word alien never entered his mind.
Now, you are heading up a public information campaign on Area 51. We've got the Facebook link up at coasttocoastam.com. Tell me a little bit about your interest in Area 51, Norrie.
Well, that's true. I was recently assigned as the public information director of the largest Area 51 page on Facebook. And so very frequently I post some interesting news about Area 51, and there's still plenty of things going on at this base in Nevada. In fact, they are expanding this facility, and recently we got word that a large hangar, a humongous hangar, or some kind of a structure is being under construction, even right now, at the south end of the south ramp at Area 51, and nobody knows what the purpose of this humongous hangar is. And this hangar, by the way, is about 4 times larger than the largest hangar that was called Hangar 18. Actually, there is a Hangar 18 in Area 51 in the northern section of the facility, but that Hangar 18 is nothing compared to this humongous hangar. It's about 4 times larger than the Hangar 18. And so we don't know if it's a new kind of a scoot and hide hangar shed storage. We don't know what it is. But one thing we know, George, is that Area 51 is active, very active, and, there's absolutely no truth to this crazy rumor that Area 51 had closed down and moved elsewhere. In fact, that's not the case. They are increasing in activity, and we can tell from the number of vehicles of the employees parked at Las Vegas McCarran Airport in the EG&G terminal. There are hundreds and hundreds of vehicles parked over there.
Most of the people on Area 51 are pretty hush-hush, Norio. When are we going to really, beyond the Bob Lazars, When are we going to get some information out there?
Well, actually, slowly but surely, information can be obtained in the public domain if one really tries to go deep into that. Because, above all, it's not really a secret base in the sense that it is an open secret. And there are so much misconception about Area 51. In fact, the government finally admitted just recently that Area 51 exists by its name, even though
That's right.
They don't like to use the word Area 51 because Area 51 is really not an official name used by the Air Force, and the Air Force only uses the term an operating base near Groom Lake, which is ridiculous because it is not only near Groom Lake, it is on Groom Lake.
What do you think is happening there?
Well, it's basically a variety of things happening there. Mainly the development of new technologies such as newer forms of unmanned aerial vehicles and unmanned combat aerial vehicles and all other kind of platforms, remotely controlled and so on. And, well, the main reason is, according to the people who are involved, is, of course, for defense purposes, development of new technologies. But we still don't know fully what the real bottom line is on Area 51.
Do you believe the stories that there's alien craft there, that they might be literally an alien there?
Well, it's hard to say because we don't have any definitive proof that Area 51 has anything to do with extraterrestrial technology. But, the very fact is that there are organizations that are made of former workers and, former employees. They even say that they only know about, 5% of everything about Area 51. So it's really difficult to make a definitive statement. Anything is possible, and that's why I am very passionate about finding out, going deeper into this, because my passion is to find out about the truth about UFO phenomenon, which has actually fascinated me for many, many years, and I'm a really passionate guy because I want to get to the bottom of these things, not just talk about these things, but get to the bottom of these things, and I haven't been able to completely. But over the years, I have come to the conclusion that we just have to deal with these topics. It's a real topic. There's no topic more important than finding about the true nature of this this UFO phenomenon and whether or not these so-called underground bases have anything to do with alien presence. And both Area 51 as well as my other favorite topic, the alleged Dulce underground base in New Mexico, are very dear to me, George, because these two bases, or one is alleged base, but the other one is an established base, Area 51. Mm-hmm. But these two topics really fascinated me, and it's really it's really the summary of everything about UFO culture and beliefs.
What do we know about the underground bases in New Mexico?
Well, actually, there are underground levels in many of these New Mexico's facilities. For example, even Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque has underground levels. I don't know how deep it is, but, it's a common sense that military bases have underground levels. especially places like Kirtland Air Force Base, which has had underground facility since 1947. In fact, there is a portion of Kirtland Air Force Base called the Manzano Base, where there had been multi-leveled underground storage facility for sensitive equipment since 1947.
Why would they put everything underground, Norio?
Well,
of course. Why not in hangars or big buildings above ground?
Well, they can, I guess. That's why hangars are important. Some of these hangars are called, scoot and hide hangars because they don't want the satellites to observe these aircraft or special access program craft. And they know what time the Russian satellites and other satellites pass over the facilities. So they created these hangars called, scoot and hide hangars just to protect their presence from spying satellites. But besides that, underground facilities are very a practical way. You don't have to build hangars if there are underground facilities. So both go hand in hand. And so I believe that there are underground facilities all over the United States, military areas, because it's common sense. But the big question is, are these underground facilities in all these locations, such as New Mexico, Nevada, California, and so on, Utah, are they actually connected? That's the big question.
Well, if they are, what does that tell you?
Well, if they are, that tells us that there is a conspiracy to hide something that we may not know anything about. So far, it's just speculation. Now, of course, there are underground levels in places like Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. It's common sense. Some of these technical areas in Los Alamos laboratories may be connected by underground tunnels. Los Alamos itself is a pretty large area with many technical areas like 49 or 48, I don't know, but it's possible that they are connected underground. But to say that there is an underground connection between Los Alamos all the way to Nevada or even to Albuquerque,
that's a long way.
To me, it's a stretch. But, anything is possible with our technology. And we had technologies to create large tunnels already back in the 1950s.
Well, a lot of people have heard these strange hums, Norio, so there's something going on.
Oh, yeah. There's these so-called low humming sound coming apparently from underground that's been heard in northern New Mexico even today, nowadays. And not only in Taos areas, but these low-frequency hums have been reported. And just a couple of years ago, there was a report of low humming sound coming from north of the Navajo River, north of Dulce, New Mexico. So, we're talking about something that's very interesting. We don't know what's going on. Perhaps they may be, tunneling underneath. Who knows? But the strange thing about all of this, George, is that when the Taos hums started, 20 or 30 years ago, the Sandia laboratories were called to investigate. But as I often say, if you call Sandia laboratories for something, investigate something, we have to investigate Sandia Laboratories themselves to see if they could be the cause.
I mean, have we ruled out that these tunnels are being built by extraterrestrials? Stay with us, Norio. We'll check in with you on that when we come right back. Well, we're interactive, so next hour we'll take your phone calls with Norio Hayakawa as we talk about secret bases and UFOs and much more to talk with him about when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. Norio Hayakawa with us. Norio, we cannot rule out the fact that these bases may have been built by extraterrestrials, can we?
No, we cannot rule out anything, George, and that's why I try to keep an open mind because we hear a lot of personal testimonies from respected people, about witnessing an alien presence and so on. So I'm not a type of person to, debunk any of these because we don't really know what reality is to begin with. Because to one person, the concept of reality may be different, and maybe there may be some levels of reality to this world. So we are just bound by what we can see and feel and touch, and that's most of the people in the world are like that. But there are people, I believe, that are able to go beyond the physical, and so that's why I don't like to debunk any of the allegations about alien contact and so on. So I try to keep myself very open.
You are heading up a conference in New Mexico in October. Tell us about that.
Oh, yes. On October the 4th, that's just about 4 weeks away, I am organizing the first time ever New Mexico UFO conference in the city of Rio Rancho, New Mexico, right next to Albuquerque. And this is the first time ever for Rio Rancho to hold any kind of a UFO conference. And today, we received an official recognition from the mayor of Rio Rancho, Greg Hull, who proclaimed October 4th as Rio Rancho's official UFO Research Day. And so we're excited about it. And, if you want to know more about this conference, you can just go to YouTube and look for New Mexico UFO Conference. All the details are in there on YouTube under New Mexico UFO Conference. And I'm so excited because we'll be talking about some interesting issues. We have a guest by the name of Greg Valdez, who is the middle son of the late Gabe Valdez, who was a New Mexico State Patrol officer in charge of Dulce, New Mexico, for many years. And then, of course, we have David Marler, who also lives in Rio Rancho, and he is an author of an interesting book called Triangular UFOs.
Yeah.
And then we have, Michael Schratt, who talks about military aerospace connection and also man-made UFOs. And then to top it off all, we have Travis Walton with his amazing experiences.
Great person. We hear a lot of reports, Norio, of these triangular-shaped UFOs. They seem to be near military bases. Could we actually have something that big and hide it?
Well, it's very difficult to imagine because most of these triangular objects that people report, the triangular craft, are humongous, such as, like a football size or 3 times the football size or, humongous. And to me, it is virtually impossible physically to create that kind of a monstrosity and actually fly at even slow speeds, as many of these reports seem to indicate that these objects actually sometimes just hover or just go very slowly, like 5 or 10 miles an hour, so you can actually run with it. We have reports from Antelope Valley in California that people had seen these humongous triangular aircraft or craft over the highway, and they were just going so slowly that they could actually, run with it, but, and then making no noise. And so propulsion-wise, it's very difficult for me to comprehend that these are physical objects, the exact same size that people report, unless we have a technology to actually deceive the observer and maybe incorporate some of the technologies such as holographic projection image from the air, to make the image larger, but we don't know.
What about the propulsion systems for these objects? You mentioned they go slow, they're very silent. Could they be anti-gravity?
They could be, yes, they could be, but we don't know too much about anti-gravity technology. I mean, there's lots of talks about all of these, but when it comes to the, nuts and bolts, it's very difficult to come up with any evidence of this. So I am of the opinion that these things may not even be flying. And this is exactly the word, the description that Dr. Jacques Vallée describes. He believes that UFOs are not necessarily flying. They just materialize and disappear for some reason or other. And I'm also of the opinion that an object that huge cannot silently go slow over an airspace, over the city and so on. But again, we don't know for sure,
It's something. People are seeing something, aren't they?
They are seeing something, because I believe the reports. And David Marler had interviewed a lot of people who have had sightings of a huge triangular-shaped craft over these years. And what's interesting is that these sightings of triangular craft have been going for ages. In fact, even as old as the 1800s, 1700s. So it's not something that just came up 20 or 30 years ago. So we are absolutely at a loss as to what these are. And but nevertheless, I continue to gather information, and, if there's any kind of a report, I am the first person to post it on the Area 51 page on Facebook. In fact, George, today I just received a call from Hoyt Velarde, who was a former police chief in Dulce, New Mexico, the very same guy that arrested me back in 1990. He called me and he said there's a lot of activity in Dulce. There have been sightings, and he's still investigating the presence of Bigfoot in that area. So, the very person that arrested me back in 1990 for asking questions about Dulce Base is now, contacting me and calling me, and he wants to go with me to a location that he believes could be the real Dulce Base.
Did he remember arresting you?
Oh, yeah, he did. But we became friends after the 2009 Dulce Base conference that I organized in Dulce in March of 1990, and he remembered me, and he at that time he said that the reason he detained us was because he was concerned about our safety. But anyway, it was during the time that he was employed as the chief of safety over there. So now he retired, so he can say anything and he can discuss anything. So there's no question that there is something there in Dulce or right near Dulce. There is some kind of a base there, I'm convinced. Maybe it's not the humongous underground, humongous alien base of any kind, but it could be some kind of a covert, off-site test facility for maybe some kind of new aircraft or craft, and other things like, biowarfare laboratory of some kind, not to the scale of, humongous, scale, but there could be something there, no question about it.
What's your gut tell you, Norio? What do you think's happening?
Well, what is happening is that these things are slowly surfacing. In other words, with the rise of the Internet and the tremendous, ability of the people to gather information. And I'm not saying that everything you see on the Internet is true, because many of the things on the Internet are disinformation or misinformation, but occasionally you can actually find some real good information on the Internet, and that's what I try to do, and this is the reason why I posted this humongous photo of a humongous hangar that's being constructed as we speak right now on Area 51. So if you go to the Facebook page of Area 51, you will see the actual photo of this humongous hangar and, other information.
It just boggles the mind, doesn't it?
It is. It does. And that's why I continue to investigate all these things, because it's incredible, what may be there. But I'm of the opinion that anything that's there in Area 51 is probably 15 to 16 to 18 years ahead of what's being reported as far as technology-wise.
Why New Mexico, Norio? What's so special about that area?
Well, New Mexico is very special, and of course, this is where I live now. I've been living here for 8 years, and I love this great state. It's the 5th largest state in the United States, in the Union. But yet it only has a population of 2 million in the entire state, George, and it's so spacious that you can do anything. In fact, it's the most ideal location for the government to conduct any kind of a military, testing, research, testing, and so on. And the strange thing is that everything seemed to have started right after World War II in 1945, at the conclusion of the war. Many people have no idea that hundreds and hundreds of German scientists from Germany came over here in a program called Operation Paperclip.
That's right.
Yeah,
and
many of them were sent.
Too.
That's right. Many of them were sent south from Albuquerque to White Sands missile ranges, and they were the pillars of the start of the America's rocket program and beyond. And what I mean by beyond is that it's very possible that the German scientists not only help in America's rocketry, but possibly in other kinds of aircraft, such as, prototypes of flying wing aircraft and so on. And also, many of these German scientists and engineers were transferred to Los Alamos Laboratory. So it's very important that we have to recognize that New Mexico is very closely related to the activities of German scientists that came here. And, but what I like about New Mexico is that there are so many locations. New Mexico is not only about Roswell. Roswell is just a minor part of this whole story when it comes to UFOs in New Mexico. I mean, there were crashes allegedly in San Antonio, New Mexico in 1945 in August. We still don't know the real truth behind it, but there was some kind of a crash over there in 1945, and then also another crash in 1947 around July 3rd in the plains of San Agustin, which is southwest of Magdalena, right near the very large array, VLA facility in New Mexico. And most people have no idea about it. And most people have no idea that on March 15th, 16th, and 17th of 1950, for 3 days in a row, every day around noontime, hundreds of Farmington, New Mexico residents witnessed hundreds of silver disc-shaped objects maneuvering in the sky over that town. And this is a fact, George. I visited Farmington, New Mexico a few years ago, and I tried to interview some people that may have remembered that sighting, in Farmington. And I finally found a gentleman at a senior center who remembered that incident, and he described exactly as the newspaper described, seeing hundreds of silver disc-shaped objects just maneuvering in the sky. It's an amazing thing.
What could they have been?
Well, we have no idea. But fortunately, the Alejandro Rojas of Open Minds came up with an actual photo, a black and white photo of part of the sighting of Farmington. You can see about 5 or 6 disc-shaped objects. But he posted that, and I reposted that photo on my page and so on. But we don't know really what happened. You're talking about hundreds and hundreds of these silver disc-shaped metallic objects flying in formation during lunchtime, for 3 days, March 15th, 16th, and 17th of 1950. And what happened was that a few days later, governmental agents arrived in Farmington and discussed these things with the residents. And I heard that many of the residents were told that not to discuss this thing with anyone, because you remember 1950 was during the height of the Cold War. And people were very
and the Korean War.
That's right, and they were very sensitive. And when a government officials come and tell you that don't discuss these things because it's a matter of national security, most people obey. And David Marler just visited Farmington yesterday, and he also got in touch with a first-hand witness to this 1950 mass sighting, and he verified that it was true.
Great story. How about any newspaper articles?
There's newspaper articles. The Farmington Daily Times had a front-page article that a saucer armada invaded Farmington, and it was published on March 18th of 1950, and today it's very difficult to find a copy of that newspaper. It was a 1-inch thick headline, on top. But it was also reported in L.A. Times, and I posted the L.A. Times article on it elsewhere in my site. But these are facts. We don't know really what happened, but right near Farmington, there's a small town of Aztec, and over there in 1948, allegedly something crashed outside. And then, of course, George, you mentioned the Socorro incident of April 24, 1964, but did you know that very same day, April 24, 1964, some people allege that a UFO incident took place at Holloman Air Force Base on that very same day, April 24, 1964, and some say that some kind of a exchange was made between the Air Force, the government, and some kind of unknown, entities.
This Farmington UFO case is fascinating to me.
It is fascinating, and we should actually keep these incidents and publicize these incidents before they are forgotten, because most people have no idea that a massive UFO sighting took place in 1950 in Farmington. That is much, much more significant and larger in scope than the so-called Phoenix lights of 1997.
Well, that's a good point. Norio, hold on. We're going to take this quick break. We'll come back and we'll take some phone calls and talk more about your work, UFOs and secret bases. And we have posted on our Twitter feed the pictures of the Farmington, New Mexico, incredible UFO cases from 1950. So go take a look at that. We're going to come back. We'll take phone calls and continue chatting with Norio Hayakawa on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. Norio Hayakawa with me. We'll take your calls as well as we talk about these incredible UFO cases. And Norio, we were talking about why New Mexico, why the crashes. You would think that if they could get here, that they'd be technologically advanced, they wouldn't crash.
That's exactly what I have always thought about, George. And, you know, I'm going to tell you a joke right here, but it has something to do with New Mexico. You know, did you know that New Mexico has one of the highest rate of drunk drivers here in all over the U.S.?
I did not know that.
Didn't you know that? You know, that's why I hate to drive at night here in New Mexico. I mean, there's so much DWI going on here. It's ridiculous. That's why I don't drive at night. But this is a joke, but it's true. But on the other hand, the crashes of these strange objects, I don't know the real reason. Maybe there's the presence of particular radars that were used in 1945, 1946, 47, I don't know, 48. But to me, something from outer space with a highly advanced technology would never have any crashes. This is one of the reasons why I am tending not to take into consideration that an actual extraterrestrial craft crashed here. And that's just my personal opinion. But nevertheless, anything is possible, as I stated many times. There have been other realistic crashes right here, George. Did you know that in Albuquerque on May 22nd of 1957, a near-nuclear catastrophe was averted because an Air Force plane accidentally dropped a hydrogen bomb right near Kirtland Air Force Base in 1957. And fortunately, it did not end up in a catastrophe because the connector to the actual nuclear explosion was not there. But nevertheless, this huge hydrogen bomb was dropped accidentally before they landed at Kirtland on that April 22nd, 1957, and, it created an explosion, but it wasn't a nuclear explosion, but nobody died because it was in a desert area right inside the Kirtland Air Force Base. And but it did create a large crater, and the Air Force personnel came right away, and within 2 to 3 days, just like Roswell, they cleaned up the entire location. So there's any sign of anything crashing. And it was one of those operations that, just like Roswell, they just cleaned it up completely. And very few people know about it, but we are going to actually visit that exact ground zero in October, right after the New Mexico UFO conference. And I'll take them to the exact location of this amazing incident of 1957.
Okay, and as a matter of fact, we've got David calling from Farmington, New Mexico now. Go ahead, David.
Hi, this is Dave Ortiz. Hi, Norio.
Hello, David.
Hi. Oh, I was going to relate a story from a lady that I know here in town. That when she was a little girl, she lived in Albuquerque. And what happened is she saw a UFO very close to her house. Actually, I heard a story. I asked her, first of all, I said, have you ever heard of the UFO that landed or did something in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the early 60s. And she says, yes. She says, Dave, I was there. I saw it. So the story was that she saw this UFO in a field, and it dropped like molten metal out of it. So I guess a crowd, a neighborhood crowd started going around it, and immediately there was Air Force personnel all around them. So that they told them to step back, and they put their tape all around it and everything. And there were two neighborhoods across the field, and anyway, when they told them that go ahead and go back home, as she was walking back, she said that she saw this UFO actually hover right over her, right in front of her yard. She said it was like this metallic dish, and it started like it paralyzed her. She said she couldn't move, and her sister told her to run in here, get in here. She couldn't move, so they grabbed her and they threw her inside the house because she was basically paralyzed. She said it felt like this prickling, like electrical feeling all over her, but it freaked her out. But then everything passed, time passed by. 2 weeks later, she said she was talking to the neighbors across the field. They were wanted to talk about the UFO experience. She said nobody would talk about it. Everybody was hushed up. And years later, she had children. And all of her children, she had 3 kids in the early 70s. And all 3 children that were ever born were born premature, 7 months. But they all came out extremely healthy and very intelligent after all that. I just wanted to relate that story real quick.
Thank you very much, Dave. A very fascinating story. And do you remember around what year that was?
It was either around 61 or 62.
61 or 62, yeah. Because Albuquerque has had a tremendous history of UFO sightings, in the 60s, 50s, you name it. And the one that I really think is important is the series of UFO sightings that took place right inside Kirtland Air Force Base in 1979, 1980. It was the so-called Manzano Base sightings. It was reported by the security of Manzano Base over there inside the Kirtland Base. The sightings like this really prove that New Mexico is a very significant area for UFO sightings, and maybe it's attracting some kind of intelligence to come to this location, because obviously New Mexico has one of the most advanced military technologies, research and testing in this humongous state.
Okay, thanks, Norio, for that. Let's go to Anonymous in Michigan. Welcome to the program, Anonymous. You're on the air with us.
Yes, I've got a very interesting. Well, first of all, Konbanwa, actually Ohio gozaimasu now, but I have a question about Mount Fuji. I was there in 83, 84, and 85, and a lot of strange lights coming off Mount Fuji in the non-climbing season. I've been all the way to the top 3 times in the climbing seasons. And in the winter months, there's not supposed to be nobody or nothing up there, and we've seen red, blue, green, and different yellow lights, round lights, and they kind of float out, then they go real fast, and then so we started looking at them through our optics on our tanks, and then we got artillery, 800-powered artillery scope, looked at it, and we could see a slight, very, very slight silver round for a half a split second, but the light was drowning out to where you couldn't really see the craft. It was looked like it was meant to be that way on purpose, but saw them many times in the winter months there. I wondered if you ever heard anything about that. There's been thousands of sightings, and people around there I've talked to in Gotemba train station and other places. Japanese people have told me different things. So I was wondering what you heard about that.
Oh, thanks so much for your testimony. Yes, you're right in saying that there have been many sightings of strange lights and objects near the mountains, various mountains in Japan, and especially near volcanoes, and there have been a lot of sightings of strange lights around the time of earthquakes and disasters, and that's a fact. But whether those are related to an actual extraterrestrial craft, we have no way of knowing. But it could be, some kind of a natural phenomenon. We don't know. But anything is possible, like I said. the sightings and all these things are real, but to get to the bottom of it, that's a big question. We don't exactly know what they are.
Norio, for some reason I prefer that they come from planetary systems as opposed to other dimensions. It just seems more exciting to know that they're out there in our universe somewhere.
Yes, it's exciting to think about it. But on the other hand, I try to be objective, and I try to be as rational as possible. And this is the reason why I have a high respect for people like Carl Sagan, who I consider to be my hero. And at the same time, I do research about UFOs. I try to look the other aspect of this phenomenon, and this is the reason why I enjoy listening to Carl Sagan and his explanations of things, and this is the reason why I like his programs, and especially he wrote an amazing book called The Demon Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark. In 1996, he wrote that book, I think the year he died. But in the book, he talks about our increasing, technology-driven world, but we fail to understand the difference between the pseudoscience and testable hypotheses of science. So it's, on the other hand, he tells us that scientific thinking is critical for the pursuit of truth, but that he also warns us that pseudoscience is burgeoning with stories that we cannot actually come up with a proof. And so he gave us a warning that, about the unreason, and the Song of Unreason is not just a cultural wrong, but a dangerous plunge into darkness. And that's why I regard all this UFOs and UFO phenomena with both feet on the ground. So because I am not a person that discounts that there are no other civilizations, and perhaps some of them may be visiting us, but not necessarily physically, because we don't know really what reality is. There could be a manipulation of time and space, and maybe they are here. Who knows? But
what do you think, Norio, of the abduction phenomenon?
Well, that's a real phenomenon. There's no question about it. It's a phenomenon that is a personal thing. And I've always stated that the abduction phenomenon is real. But the big question is, what is it? To the experiencer, it is real in every sense of the word. But on the other hand, we have also known that the military has had technologies to be able to simulate certain kind of experience through various types of mind control technologies. And Dr. Jacques Vallée came up with this incident in Brazil many, many years ago, whereby the Naval Research Laboratory did experiments with the indigenous people in the jungles in Brazil and created a UFO scenario with abductions by using a high-tech helicopter and bringing in the indigenous people. And within a few days, the entire village was filled with stories about alien abductions. So I'm not saying that the abductions are induced by military mind control. It could be a real thing, but so far we just don't know. We just don't know. That's the bottom line.
All right, let us go now to Ann in Los Angeles. Hey, Ann, go ahead. Thanks for holding.
Thank you for taking my call, George. Ohio gozaimasu.
Ohio.
I'm so excited that you're having the conference of your rancho. My best friend lives there. I must tell her. But I was wanting to know, do you have any information regarding, you were talking about the triangles. There was the original man-made one in Chino. It was a small mock-up, and they had it just recently, I'd say like 10 years ago, and I don't know, I cannot say the other station, but it's a public station. I know you know, George. You know, PBS had a film. We had a fleet of 18 of them in World War II. But also, have you been aware of the war over Los Angeles? During the war, we used to have blackout nights. And I recall they would close the big velvet curtains, but we would peek out. And there's a museum near Fort MacArthur, which George and Ori could tell you how to get to. And they actually have the headlines and the pictures, photograph of the newspaper, which shows what happened. But they tried to blame it on that there was a submarine in San Pedro, but it wasn't. They were actually fighting and shooting at a saucer that night. And it was during a blackout. But
and it was making pings and everything. They were hitting it.
We could feel I lived in the area where the Doheny house is. And at that time it was quite nice. It isn't now. But we could actually feel like thunder. And we really got scared. We thought, oh, my God, they're bombing us. But it was that flying saucer. They have a lot of evidence there in that museum if you want to go see it or you have information already. But those are the things also. When you were in Japan and young, did you see a film called Starman? That always reminds me. Japan had many, many good science fiction, but I think they were really true. And I even remember the name of the boy was Ryochi. But they had so many points in these films that sort of look now in retrospect like a lot of truth coming out. What do you think about it?
Well, you made a very good comment. Yes, you know, a lot of these incidents are used in, you know, animation and all kinds of things. So many of these incidents really actually took place. No question about it. As you mentioned, the Battle of Los Angeles, 1942, I believe. In fact, David Marler, a friend of mine who lives in Rio Rancho and an author, he has the original photo of the Battle of Los Angeles, 1942, taken by a photographer. And he has the original. He acquired the original a few years ago, and so, in fact, he may show this the actual photo at the conference in October in Rio Rancho. But as you said, you know, there are so many incidents here and there and everywhere about sightings, and we are still at a point where we are at a loss as to the real nature of this phenomenon. That's all I can say.
1943 in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, there was a crash as well. An incredible story there, Norio.
I have not actually followed that incident that you're talking about, but sounds interesting.
Yeah, we're going to have to get you some information on that. Now, for people who want to go to your conference, give us some directions here to get there.
Well, actually, the conference is called the New Mexico UFO Conference. It's going to be held on October 4th, on Saturday, the very same day as the start of the Balloon Fiesta in Albuquerque. And, the Balloon Fiesta is not the only thing happening in New Mexico in October, and this conference is happening on the very same day. And so I encourage people to attend the Balloon Fiesta, which is amazing in Albuquerque and beautiful. But at the same time, you can actually drop by the conference. And the New Mexico UFO Conference is going to be on the 4th of October, 4 weeks from now, at a Sabana Grande Recreation Center in Rio Rancho. And actually, you can get all this information by just going into YouTube and just look for New Mexico UFO Conference, and the entire information is there, as well as the website. Actually, we have a website called nmufoconference.com. nmufoconference.com.
We'll put a link up for you on that. We're going to come back and take final phone calls on Coast to Coast AM. For a portion of our show tomorrow, Richard Gage joins us as we talk about why 700 architects and engineers believe that there was something else during 9/11. So that's part of our program tomorrow. Make sure you're part of it. And we'll come back in a moment with final phone calls here on Coast to Coast AM. Norio Hayakawa with us. Norio, let's talk a little bit about Roswell before we wrap up with final calls here. In your opinion, what do you think happened there in 1947?
Well, it's a big question, of course. Roswell, we know that an incident or an accident took place, I would say. But whether it was an extraterrestrial crash of an object from another world, we have no way of knowing. What's interesting about the Roswell incident is that the crash of an object over there in Roswell was not a disc-shaped craft. It was more or less a delta-shaped, a delta wing craft, which is very interesting because, as I told you before, Germany was already developing delta-shaped flying wing craft already in 1943, and the U.S. military may have acquired some prototypes similar to that, and it's very possible that some kind of a thing may have crashed and it was covered up. But I'm not saying that something from outer space did not crash there, because we have no way of knowing. It's just covered with a complete mystery. And as I said, everything was cleaned up right away by the Air Force. So we don't know the truth.
They jumped on that. Let's go now to the calls. Michael in California. Hi, Michael. Go ahead.
How are you, gentlemen, this evening? It's great to talk to you. George and Norio-san, I'm sorry, Norio. I'm going to regress just slightly here. And I want to go back to the first 2 hours of the show. Your first two callers tonight on my feed repeated them one after the other. Ann was first, and then the gentleman with the lights around Mount Fuji. I listened to them twice. And my point is that you want to talk about conspiracy theories. George, I think the FCC is on you, and he's cutting off your guests and your callers. And this is a great thing to start a conspiracy theory. Other than that, gentlemen, thank you for such a great show tonight.
You're welcome.
I don't know why the first two callers were repeated back-to-back on my show this evening.
That's weird. That's strange. No, it's not an FCC issue at all, but we've had strange things happen on this program, haven't we? Let's go next to Randy in Las Vegas. Randy, take it away.
Well, I'm not a debunker. I've seen them, but I have one burning question. If these guys are so advanced, why do they keep bumping into our planet and crashing?
That's what we talked about earlier. Go ahead again, Noria.
That's what we talked about it, and this is one of the reasons why I just don't buy 100% that the extraterrestrial craft crashed, because something that comes out from space and travels all this distance with high technology would never crash, and that's why something crashing is completely beyond the range of understanding, unless they did it on purpose, or maybe our government staged something on purpose for some kind of a deception.
They wouldn't do that, Norio, would they?
Well, they could do anything.
Next up, we go to Randy in North Carolina. Hi, Randy. Go ahead.
Hey, George. Great show tonight.
Thank you, sir.
And hey, Noria. Listen, just real quick about what he said. The only one I ever heard about crashing was the one in Roswell. I mean, all the rest are just sightings, So, accidents happen. So, I got two quick questions for you. Okay, did the U.S. Air Force, did they have a group called Foo Fighters that was sometime in maybe the late 40s and the 50s that was supposed to fight against UFOs, surprisingly enough? And then I saw a show a few years ago where this really good pilot was taken to a craft. It was a craft he'd never seen before. They didn't tell him anything about it. So he walks in there and he thought, wow, I can't believe that we have the technology to do this. He said everything was like extraction molded, Everything was one piece, You know, the table, the chairs, you name it, everything was just one piece, extraction molded. Have you ever heard of that before?
I haven't heard that before, sure. But you mentioned about Foo Fighters. Yeah, there's a lot of documentations about sightings of these, objects, round-shaped.
During World War II, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we cannot come to any conclusion. We can only speculate as to what they were. They may have been something that the Germans or even the U.S. may have created in secrecy, but we don't know. Or it could be some kind of a probing thing from outer space. But as far as I'm concerned, it's impossible physically for any object to arrive from this to this Earth from such a distance using any kind of a propulsion system. That's my take on all of this. That I believe that there are intelligent civilizations elsewhere in this universe, no question about it. But it's a different question when one says that we are being visited physically by the emissaries of these advanced civilization in a physical spacecraft. But as I said, there could be other ways for them to get here by such a thing as time warp and so on, and overcoming, these physical barriers.
Let's go to Michelle now in Garberville, California. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. I wanted to tell you about my mom. In 1960 or 61, she was coming home from the doctor, a lonely country road in Marin County, which is right above San Francisco, and a light came directly at her car. It was at night, and she turned the wheel very fast in order to avoid this light, and it caused her car to roll down the hill. As she was rolling down the hill, the same blinding flash of light was now steady behind her. And as she rolled down the hill, she felt that she was suspended in the car, and the car was rolling around her. And when they finally got her out of the car, there wasn't a scratch or a bruise on her, and the car was completely destroyed.
Amazing. Thank you very much for such a fascinating account of what happened. Something must have happened. I don't know. There are many incidents like that, even in New Mexico, whereby a lady was driving in northern New Mexico in 1979, and a blinding light came over, and she lost all consciousness, and later on she claimed that she was taken to a facility in northern New Mexico underground, and that was the beginning of the whole story of the Dulce underground base that Paul Benowitz investigated. But anyway, I believe that these experiences to the experiencer are real. But whether they are physically real to other persons, that's a different question. But I welcome all of these incidents as recounted by the witness.
In Aztec, New Mexico, how many objects crashed? Just one?
Well, as far as I know, there was one in 1948 outside of Aztec. But a lot of people think that Aztec was just a hoax, but I doubt it was a hoax because we found some witnesses from Dulce, New Mexico, who told us that in 1948 they saw some bright object flying or moving towards Aztec, which is west of Dulce. So at least we have a few witnesses that they had seen some kind of a craft or light the very same year in Aztec.
Let's go to Marshall, first-time caller, Lubbock, Texas. Marshall, you're up with us. Go ahead.
Yeah, my grandparents were from Farmington, and my grandfather worked in the oil field, and he used to tell me stories whenever I was little about watching a craft go down. He worked the evening tower, so he was working at night, and he used to tell me about a big flash of light and then just a huge crash out in the desert out there.
What a great thing to hear. And did he elaborate any further, Marshall, on what might have happened?
No, he really didn't. He wasn't really that kind of guy. He just kind of told me about it and then went on about it.
Stories of a grandfather, they got to be true, Nouriel.
Well, that's why we have to interview these people before they pass away, because it was 1950, and that's why we're trying to gather as many witnesses as possible to the Farmington incident before they pass away.
Let's go to Carlos in Carson City, California. Good morning, Carlos. You're up with us.
Good morning, George. And Nouriel, I had the opportunity to have lunch with you several years in Torrance, California with a common friend of ours named Aaron, and we had several conversations. And then I heard you at the History Channel one time, but I'm trying to recall, didn't you say at one time, or is it just my imagination, that at Area 51 you were working on holographic technology to create sort of a fictitious extraterrestrial landing? Well, is it possible that that holographic technology was used on 9/11? Those planes hitting the towers. Let's remember that no debris from the planes was recovered, and I find that tremendously. I get very skeptical when nothing at all was recovered from there. And just overall, I have a hard time, a little skeptical about this whole alien agenda, mainly because there was a statement made by Henry Kissinger, which hangs over me. He says, what if we made people believe that there was an extraterrestrial landing? They would unite under a one-world government. And so we know about Henry Kissinger. He's a top Illuminati agent, and they're working for a one-world government. This whole thing could be a hoax. I don't know.
You made a very good point, and that's when, during the 1990s, I stressed that possibility that the government had enough technology, and especially now, to simulate a fake type of alien scenario by the use of many technologies such as airborne holographic projectors and so on. In fact,
Project Bluebeam, isn't it?
That's right. That's basically what it is. But, of course, that's a possibility. But there could be the real thing, but at the same time, the government may be trying to mimic the real thing by producing their own version of this technology, by producing UFO-like things with the holographic projections. But that does not mean that there are not real things going on at the same time. Maybe there is a parallel development and goings on.
Let's go to John, truck driving in Utah. Hello, John. Welcome to the program. You're up with us.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's so nice to talk to you. I spent the last weekend in Albuquerque, and I met up with a good friend of mine who was an Air Force pilot, and he worked at Sandia Labs. In fact, he just retired after 38 years there. And he was telling me that he had added this addition to his house, and the stem wall that comes up the concrete part, his bed just happens to be right over that. And he said sometimes late at night, he'll be laying there and just barely going, still awake, and he can feel this vibration from under the ground, And he said he'd run outside, and he couldn't hear it. It wasn't like a train. There was no trucks or anything. It'd be all quiet outside, and he'd go back in, lay back down, and he could still feel it. Yeah, you were mentioning that earlier. I just thought I'd kind of bring that up. He's a very legitimate, he worked with Sandia and traveled all around the world and did a lot of specialized things for him and tested stuff at military bases all over the world. And so he's, I would believe anything he said. I was telling him about my one and only UFO encounter earlier in my life because I was a pilot also, and I was just telling him about what it looked like because it came over this hill, and he's going, I didn't even tell him what it was yet. I just explaining about this airplane, supposedly, and he goes, oh, you saw a UFO, And I thought it was kind of funny from somebody coming from Sandia Labs to say something like that. And I said, you ever get to see anything out there? And he goes, no, he kept us pretty compartmentalized, and he goes, they kept me on the road all the time, so he wasn't there as much,
Exactly. You mentioned the right word, compartmentalization, because many people who work in top-secret laboratories are only assigned a certain kind of work, specialized and highly compartmentalized, and that's how they
keep the secret technologies, and so that they only know parts of what's going on.
And the sightings, of course, Norio, continue around the country. Peter Davenport from the National UFO Reporting Center regularly tells us about these incredible sightings everywhere. They just don't stop, do they?
They just don't stop. You're right. And this is why I'm so passionate about this important topic, getting to the bottom of this whole UFO phenomenon, which we have been puzzled by for so many years without yet a single definitive answer to this mystery. That's why I'm so excited to be living in this day and age, because, we have something going on right now. We just don't know what it is.
What's your gut tell you? Deep down inside, what do you think?
Well, I believe that we are being slowly manipulated or conditioned to some event in the future when our belief system will play a major role in finding out about the true nature of secrecy. In other words, what I'm saying is that we may be conditioned for something to come, and the UFO culture and the UFO beliefs may play a major role in this development in the near future, and that's my gut feeling. And the details that I don't know, but that's my gut feeling, that we are being conditioned.
We just may be. Norio, thank you for being on the program, and good luck with your UFO conference in October.
Thank you so much, George, for having me here, and I hope people will visit this beautiful and wonderful state of New Mexico in October.
You got it. For Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladassour, Stephanie Smith, Chris Boros, George Nappenard Bell, I'm George Norrie. Somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.